Must be awfully red. I wonder why. Have you ever heard a 2-year-old try to reason with you? It goes something like this. No take bath, me eat cookie. It's enough to make you laugh until you realize they're serious. Being a parent is an interesting ride. It's full of challenges and heartwarming moments and good enough giggles to fill a balloon factory for sure. But what the grown-ups always don't tell you is this best parenting considers the unique path that each child is meant to walk. Just like the Hebrew phrase we find in Proverbs chapter 22, the way he should go. It's about understanding your child's strengths and their particular quirks and maybe their even stubborn streaks. You see, when we take into consideration, I can't see, this is not big enough, it's not working, I gotta make it bigger. Forward. Have you ever tried to reason with a 2-year-old? It goes something like this. Me no back, I cookie. It makes you want to giggle, right? Until you realize that they're serious, completely serious. So, being a parent is a wild ride, and it is full of challenges and heartwarming moments and stories to look back on at a later date. But at the moment, it's just not even fun. I want to share with you today maybe some tips that grown-ups don't always tell you before you have children, or maybe in the midst of children. The best parenting considers the unique path of each one of their children. We know that each child is made uniquely different. Just look at a group or a family that has the same, either all girls or all boys, and notice how all of the differences. And I'll talk about that in just a few moments. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 22, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot about that, about the importance of raising our children in the way that they should go. But I want to point out today a couple of nuggets about that particular statement. That scripture says, in the way he should go. And it's interesting that if we go back to the Hebrew, we understand that there's some emphasis on the child themselves, their particular strengths, their particular quirks, and even some of their sets to go a certain way. So, take for instance, little Sarah at the tender age of 4. She decided that broccoli was just an enemy, and it was a living, breathing enemy. And one night during a particularly epic dinner time battle, she declared, I am not eating trees with eyes, right? And so we see that children have their own ideas about what something is. And then maybe there's Timmy, the aspiring astronaut, that at least that's what he claimed he was, and his fascination with the stars and with space and using boxes to make rocket ships. You know, my younger brother was like that. He was always interested in the stars. And quite honestly, I thought that was just a little weird. You see, because he's totally different than I am. So who can forget maybe an 8-year-old who is a budding fashion icon? Well, actually, I could change the name and tell you it's actually my daughter. My second daughter was a budding fashion icon. She would come out when we were ready for church and she would have one of her dad's ties on, hanging off to the side of her head. And she would have all kinds of different colors and clothing on that would make you wonder, where is she getting that? Is she colorblind? And if you questioned her, she would say, it's my fashion, mom. You see, these are just a few things that are fun to look back on, but sometimes we make a battle out of something that's really showing us who our children are. See, some of these glimpses back at our children, or maybe you're in the midst of it right now, shows us a little bit more of who they were and the uniqueness. And it's called um, understanding our children. I remember one mom telling me the story, such as I told you about my daughter, who was very much into fashion, but her fashion didn't look like anybody else's. Another mom had the same thing. And when she asked her, she said, it's color blocking, mom. It's all the rage. You know, you can get some really cool pictures of who your child is when you take a moment and you begin to look at the things, their likes and their dislikes, their disposition and their temperament. You see, because the scripture tells us that we are to train up a child in the way he should go. So if we haven't met, I'm Cynthia Martin, and I'm a minister and a speaker and a Christian growth coach. And I help women particularly go forward in their relationship with the Lord to the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. So I am a wife and a mother and a grandmother. Yep, this old lady does have some lessons for you, though, hopefully some nuggets that you can take home. I successfully raised 4 daughters. They love Jesus, and all of them are college graduates. Actually, I have 3 who have master's degrees and 1 who has a PhD. They're very successful women in their own right, off having the most smartest human beings on earth, which are called grandchildren. But you see, each one of my daughters are strikingly different, even though if you was to look at them, they look the same. My oldest daughter is an accounting person. She's a CPA, an aspiring. She's finishing her last testing. The next daughter has a degree in business administration and management. My next daughter is the brain scientist, and the last daughter has a master's degree in history. Let me tell you, raising those 4 daughters was raising 4 different children. So I'm going to give you some tips about raising children. Proverbs 22:6 tells us, I'm going to read this scripture to you. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. So we know that children need training, right? It's our job as parents to not just let them go and not teach them anything, but to particularly train them and show them how to do life. But also, as the beginning of actually the end of that statement, that the end of that sentence says, in the way he should go. Well, we know that we want them to grow up to love Jesus and to live a godly life, but we understand that every child is different and every child is going to have a different path. And I think sometimes as parents, we focus on getting them towards the Lord, but we don't do enough investigation into the individuality of that child to understand what their particular bents are. We need to have a sense of what God has placed in them and what he's going to desire to do with their life. Because if we go back to the original language, the Hebrew in which this portion of scripture was written in, it speaks of a child's unique way, the inclination of that child's heart. It speaks of discerning a child's strengths and weaknesses and parenting in such a way that helps bring that into account and help shepherd them into the right way. See, the book of Proverbs often presents the concept of the way, being the path given of wisdom, and in life contrast to the way of folly, right? There's the folly and there's the wisdom, and that's what we have set before us in the book of Proverbs. So we know that there is also this way in which we can train each child. The scripture tells us in this verse the way he should go. And here it would mean to dedicate the child according to their physical and mental and even temporal um, abilities and the way in which they were created. When we say train up a child in the way he should go, we need to take into account his or her mental abilities, his physical abilities, his emotional abilities, their temperament, and their care. You'll see one child being extremely compassionate and another child being concerned about being first, being very competitive. You'll notice the things that they play with. I remember as a little girl, I would spend hours in my room setting up my desk and preparing to teach. I never taught because there was no one there, I guess, but I was preparing to teach for days and days, setting up my desk and playing with pens and paper. Well, to this day, a favorite thing of mine is pen and paper. And my gift by God is the ability to teach. So we see these things that are put out in our children when they're small, and life comes along, unfortunately, and we begin to tell them, oh, you want to be a doctor. Oh, you want to be a dentist. Oh, you want to follow in your father's footsteps. Oh, you want to, and we begin to put on them what we believe that they should do in comparison to what the world around us is suggesting would be a good career. And we fail sometimes, not always, but sometimes we fail to see their natural bent that God has put in them. And so I believe that, yes, we need to train them up to love and honor the Lord, to come into relationship with Him, to lead a godly life. But we also want to train them to go in their way. And so, as a mother and a grandmother now who has raised four daughters successfully, I do want to speak to that there is a huge importance on recognizing their unique value and their unique contribution to life. I remember asking my daughters when they were at home questions opinion based questions, so that they would have a few moments and opportunities in which they could answer questions. And I was looking for their opinion so that would help them to learn to process and make decisions while they were still at home. I never gave them that's a wrong answer. I asked them to explain to me why they felt that way. They grew up to be, as I said, very successful women because they have the ability to problem solve and think through and be able to stand up for the opinions that they have. I think it's very important. Let me give you another nugget, ladies. I think it's very important that you allow your child to fail while they're at home. When our daughters became 16, they were given a checkbook and they were given their own car. That was really mainly so that they could run errands for me. But they took their car to get oil changes. I'll never forget the time my daughter came home with a $300 bill because she believed the man at the oil change place that everything needed to be replaced, right? So that was a lesson, and it did cost me, but she learned to call home before she did anything other than get the oil changed. These are things that they can do still safely within the confines of home. I want to talk about the importance of knowing who your child is. As I said, I have these four daughters, and one, my oldest daughter, is very quiet. She's very introverted. She wasn't really very social. She was the child that I never had to give a bedtime to. I had to tell her she had to stay up until she was always a sleeper. When she was a little girl, she would run over to the couch when you'd say it was nap time, and she'd run over to the couch and she'd lay down and she'd be asleep within 2 minutes. It's really interesting how different they are. And she was very easy. And then I had my second daughter who had colic and cried for the first 2 years. Highly, highly, highly energized and energetic. young one she was. To this day, she's not one who wants to go to bed at night. She's very much a night owl. We'd made a deal with her. We'd say, you stay in your room. You can stay up all night, but you have to stay in your room. Agree? And she'd say yes. And in the morning, we'd go in there and have to find her. She'd be stuck in the closet or under the bed or somewhere where she sometime must have in the middle of the night collapsed because she didn't require very much sleep. To this day, as I stated, she's a night owl. She's also very high energy and very quick at making decisions and processing information. My third daughter always wanted to know why. She's the one who ended up being the brain scientist. Go figure. She always wanted to know why. Why does it work that way? Why? My fourth daughter is really interested in history. She has a master's degree in history. Interesting enough, she read all the time. And so we see often their particular personalities come out in what they do. I went over time. I got to stop and do something else. Have you ever heard a 2-year-old and try to reason with them? No, I cookie. And you're like, no, bath. It is funny, but it's not funny at the time. You see, I'm at the age where I can look back and I think those stories are adorable. But when I was in them, they weren't so great. Hi, I just want to share a little bit with you today about raising children and training them up in the way that they should go. Tell you a few stories before we get started. See, we have children in our lives. It's not going to help. I can't. I switched to the one without any. Let's not. There we go. Have you ever heard a 2-year-old try to reason with you? No bath. I eat cookie. You know, I can smile and giggle a bit now, but when I was in the midst of it, it wasn't just so fun. Don't you love the differences that our children and the trends and the stages that they go through as they grow? Have you ever tried to reason with a 2-year-old? Especially when your 2-year-old is saying back to you, no bath, I cookie. We can giggle now, but it's not so fun. We're in the midst of it, is it? It's enough to make you laugh, but until you realize that they're completely serious. See, being a parent is a really wild ride, and it is full of challenges and heartwarming moments and has enough giggles to fill up a balloon factory. Just for instance, let's talk about Sarah. At the tender age of 4, she decided that broccoli was alive. And at one evening at a disastrous dinner, she shouted, I'm not eating trees with eyes. And you know, I can look at that and I can smile affectionately because I remember those days. They're showing up for who they are and their opinions. Or maybe the little boy who pretends he's an astronaut and he builds rocket ships out of cardboard boxes and even maybe gets the pets involved. You can look at our children when they're young and you can look at the different things that they do while they're playing, and we can get an insight a little bit into who they are when they're growing up. One of my daughters was an interesting dresser. Actually, I should say two. The second daughter would come downstairs at church time with one of her father's ties tied around her head and the long part hanging down. And she would have maybe a striped top on and a plaid skirt, different colored socks, and maybe bright red shoes. And there would be no red in anything else. And she thought she looked fabulous, and she would flip that tie as she was preparing to go to church. I can look back now, and those are very fond moments. We actually took her to the photographers one day, and she had done that. So I left it on, and we got some pictures of her dressed in her way. And those are pictures that still make me smile. But when you're getting to go somewhere and you want them to look like they know who they are, that's the problem. She did know who she was. When we want them to look the way we want them to look, it can be a hassle. My third daughter would wear my high heels. During that time, I would wear those big, tall, 3 or 4 inch heeled high heels. And she would come down for church, and she knew when you picked her up, her feet would go up. So there was no way you couldn't shake her out of those high heels. And yep, I did let her wear them to church. She loved those things. She still likes shoes today. See, we have so many fond memories when we look back at our children. And if you're in the midst of it, let me tell you, this season too shall pass, and you will look back with fond memories as well. There are a few glimpses that I shared with you of hilarious, messy, and ultimately heartwarming stories that we share as parents. Sure, there are meltdowns and mismatched outfits and broccoli induced nightmares at the dinner table. But amidst all that chaos, you also witness the boundless creativity, the fierce independence, and the love that you have for your children that melts the heart faster than ice cream on a hot summer day. So let's talk a little bit about raising children that are unlike any other. If we've never met before, I'm Cynthia Martin. I'm a speaker and a Christian growth coach who helps women go forward in their relationship with God. Beyond that, and maybe even before that, I'm a wife, a mother, and a granddaughter. I'm the mother of 4 successful women who are now have children and raising children of their own and have very successful careers. They love Jesus, but they're all unique. 4 daughters, and not one of them the same. You see, I have 4 daughters, but one that has a PhD and 3 daughters with master's degrees. One is in business, one is a certified public accountant, and one is a history major, and one is a brain scientist. So I had 4 different girls as daughters, and they all have different strengths, they have different personalities, and they have different temperaments, and they have different weaknesses as well. You know, the scripture tells us in Proverbs 22:6, which you may hear a lot during this summit and seminar, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. In that particular verse, I want to focus in on the way he should go. When a child is being raised, all children need training, right? It is the job of parents to not just simply let them live, but it is our job to train them and to teach them. But the important part we need to recognize is that scripture says, in the way he, or we can say she, should go. And what I want to point out with that is when you go back to the Hebrew, the original language in which this verse was written, it speaks of a child's individual way and their inclination. It speaks of discerning their strengths and their weaknesses and their tendencies, and they're bent towards something. I remember growing up myself as a child long, long ago, that my younger brother was interested in the stars. And I just really thought that was stupid. I thought, why do you want to look at the stars? See, because it was not an interest of mine, but he was fascinated with the stars. So the book of Proverbs often presents the concept of the way. We see that it is the book of wisdom, right? In contrast to folly. We have presented folly if we're going to follow the wrong way, or the book of wisdom. And so we see in Proverbs 22:5 that there is a way to train a child in. And the way he should go would mean that the child should go according to their physical, mental, even emotional, their abilities and their tendencies. So it's training them according to their way, implying their particular desires. The true business of training children according to his way, in every way, each child is special, right? And they have particular giftings and particular interests. As I said, I have four daughters, and they're all in different genres of business and different sets of interest and different sets of strengths. And so we see, even from the difference of one child, I had to tell her how late she had to stay up until this particular time. And another daughter, I just gave up giving her a bedtime because she just couldn't go to sleep. She required very little sleep. So the agreement was, you stay in your room and you don't have to go to sleep at all. Of course, she did fall asleep, but it was way after we fell asleep, and we would find her underneath the bed or underneath in the closet somewhere, because she doesn't need very much sleep, and she still doesn't today. She's very quick and able to assess situations very fast. And our older one is very methodical and line upon line upon line, which makes her a great CPA. That next daughter, who's very quick, is a very great manager, and she is a manager in business, and she does extremely well over certain locations. The third daughter, remember that she used to wear my high heels with her wherever she would go. She'd stick her little toes in, and you'd go and pick her up, and she knew enough to put her toes up so she didn't lose those shoes. My second daughter would come down with a tie wrapped around her head and a striped top on and plaid skirt that had totally different colors, and a pair of socks, maybe in a bright lime green, and a pair of red shoes, flashy shoes. And she'd be ready to go because she was all into fashion and she thought she was all that. To this day, she's the one in the family who knows what is what and what to wear and what not to wear. And so it's very important that we recognize that our children each are unique in their own way. We can see that. We can see their natural bent. Not only do we train them to grow up to love Jesus and honor Jesus and live holy lives. Yes, that's important, but we also need to encourage them to go in the way God created them. We know in Psalms chapter 139, verse 16 says that in the womb, he knit us together and he wrote our days in his book for us, even before we were born. So God has a plan for our child. And we as parents would be wise to usher them into what they desire. My youngest child was watching cartoons when she was in high school, and my other daughters would say, Mom, are you going to ever make her quit watching cartoons? And I said, no. And it's interesting, as she is married to an attorney who works for an anime company. He does legal work for anime movies in California. So see, there's always a reason, and we need to encourage and let them go in the areas in which their natural tendency goes. So I want to share 3 nuggets with you before I close today. Tell your children who they are and their value and their worth. Nurture those strengths and encourage them in their strengths. Nugget number 2, give them an opportunity to fail while they are at home. And nugget number 3, ask them for their opinion and listen to their answers. This enables them to be able to make decisions before they leave home. I do want to share with you today that I do have a free resource. It's a prayer journal. It has prayers for you to pray over your child, because there's nothing better that we can do than pray for our children. I hope this helps you today, and that you're encouraged that this too shall pass, and that if you follow the Lord, then you'll be doing the right thing. God bless you, and have a fabulous day.